Hello, it's Wednesday, March 3rd. I'm Pastor Ann Fenlason of Trinity Lutheran Church in Long Lake, Minnesota, and welcome. On Monday, I spoke about the beginning of the 5th chapter of Mark's Gospel. The 5th chapter is just so remarkable. I read the story of the beginning of that chapter about the Gerasene demoniac, where Jesus cast the spirits out of the man. And so we proceed from verse 21 now to hear a story that's kind of woven together, two healing stories that are woven together in a really remarkable fashion. We do not have the time in this short devotion to unpack everything about this story, but I'll give you a little bit, and we'll be hearing parts of the story tonight at the Lenten worship. It's the scripture that this evening is based on. That we'll be hearing. It's the one that the mentors and the mentees will be also hearing in their study together. But let me go ahead and read it for you. It starts at verse 21. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him. And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Now while he was still speaking, some people from the leader's house came to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jairus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this they were overcome with amazement. And he strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. This woman who had been bleeding, she was considered unclean, which would have made her ostracized and outcast from society. She was taking great risk to even move her way through that crowd. Remember, the story says everybody was pressing in on Jesus. There was probably no room to barely move. She might have been crawling on her hands and knees to get to him. And she knew that every person she touched would be considered unclean because she touched them, because she was unclean. So this was an awful risk she was taking. There was great faith in that. Also, her statement that if I but just touch the fringe of his cloak, I will be made well. That's a lot of faith too. And we know that Jesus felt it when she touched that fringe of his cloak, and he turned around. Some people, when they say this text, they say Jesus' voice in a very accusatory tone. Who touched me? But I don't believe Jesus was accusing, trying to shame anybody there. I think he knew who touched her, but the more important question was that he needed to find that woman. He needed her to know why she had been healed. He needed her to know that it was her faith that had healed her. And we know, of course, that after this, Jesus goes and heals Jairus' daughter. Jesus had called the woman daughter, and he goes to heal Jairus' daughter. So much to this story. So I'll see you at church tonight. Take care. Bye-bye.